Good early morning. Before I do my Coney Misty update, reminded me a couple subscribers or viewers put some comments in about wanting to calculate returns. So what I thought I would do is I keep different spreadsheets, but I kind of built one to show you how to track your investments, and I wanted to do it without and with dividends. So let's get started on the upper part of this. At the very end of building it, I turned it into a table. Those of you that don't know how to do that, I'll show you. But bottom line, let's go over here and say I got an invest date, right? So this is the date that I invested in something. I put that date in here. I use a month, day, year, but I only display under my options 2-digit date, right? There's no reason to show 2023. And that's all done. Yeah, I'll just show you guys for the heck of it. So on my date, when I go down here, more number formats, I pick this particular date, right? So I'm using a desktop, and I'm using Microsoft Office 2021, but 365, I have it on another computer. Doesn't vary radically. For those of you that use Google Sheets, and it's an excellent tool also. Formulas are slightly different, but not really that different. So if I get a lot of requests for that, I'll build one in Google Finance for you. So at the end of the day, here's investment date. Here's how much did I invest in this stock. Okay, now you can see I started down here with a couple examples on Misty and Coney of my investments. So I actually show the date, and then I show the shares and the price. Okay, but this is a more simplified. Let's just say that you already know what your share count and your price is, and you want to add another column, but not a whole lot changes. But I noticed when I went down and wanted to do more detail, I needed to do that. Okay, so we did 421, invested 7. This is made up on the top. It's my actuals on the bottom. So the value is simply what's it at today, right? So I look up the stock price, I look up the investment at 74.55 on 7,000. Thus my gain was 455. Now this is a neat one. In Excel, it allows you to do a today function, right? So over here I had said it's 4/21/23, and when it looks up the date, it's already 4:20, right, in the morning. So it says, hey, you've been in this investment 365 days. All I did was just drag my formula down, right? So I didn't have to enter all the length and everything. So on this one, it's a C3, right? The gain is simply what's the value minus the investment, right? The date comes into play with days invested, right? So the reason we have that in here is we're not only going to do what's our return, which is pretty straightforward, but what is our annualized return? You see that out there a lot, right? Like, let's say for 2 months I bought something and it went way up. Well, what if it kept going up at that same rate? And I'm only 2 months into it, so basically this would be 6 times that, right? Something, and you'll see that down here when I get into Misty and Coney. And the reason I didn't do them up here is because they also have dividends. So to get your total return, you need to do how much are your dividends yielding and how much is your gain or loss, a positive or negative yield, and then add those two together. And that's what people have been asking me. Oh, my NAV reduction, right? Sometimes you can have one of these stocks and your 30 or 40% annual yield, yet you're underwater slightly on the NAV. So again, the price is really a function of bear and bull markets. Right now, the yield max funds are all geared. I say this all the time with Misty and Coney. If somebody else doesn't even know what I'm talking about because they're watching my channel, no problem. But you can invest in high yield positions where your underlying stock is losing money, but because the yield is so high, you're still making money. And YieldMax has some bearish ones coming very soon. They've also got a direct Bitcoin, YBIT or YBTC. Defiance, I think, has YBTC, but I'll look up YieldMax's and report it on my Coney and Misty updates. That one will come out next week. The underlying is actual Bitcoin. Okay, so back to this. So my sheet goes across. So what is my total return? Well, it's C3 minus B3, right? It's simply what's the value now less the investment, okay, which gives me 455, and then I divide that by the days invested, right? I could have simply just picked D divided by B, but it's just what I did here. Now, what's my annualized? I wrote that out here, right? So this function, basically, how do I get return? So I need to say equals, double paren, right? And follow the formula. B3 plus D3 divided by B3, which is very similar, by the way. You know why this annual is exactly the same? Because look at this. We had this investment for 365 days. This isn't, right? You only had this one for 343 days. Hence, the annual return is greater than the return. Look what happens when I have something for 248 days, right? So that's about 2/3, 66% of it. So sure enough, it's another third more, right? Getting up to 72 over 49. So you always have to consider that. So when I get a yield here of 18%, but I've held it for 611 days, that's almost 2 years. So that yield is going to drop down to 10 on an annualized basis, right? Where I invested 12,000, it's now worth 14,240. So if you have questions, please like or subscribe if you enjoy this, and let me know what your questions are. But I thought this was particularly will be useful. I'm going to get into Misty and Coney and show you how to do it for something that yields monthly like this, along with, it wouldn't have mattered if it's a quarterly dividend, whatever, but where you're trying to figure out what's your total return considering the NAV gain or loss, right? The capital gain or loss, and add the dividend distribution. Or in the case of YieldMax, they just call it a distribution. Okay, so what I did on this was I just built this with rows, and then there's a function, and it may be slightly different in 365, where I did an insert, and then I went over here to table. Where the heck was my table option? Right here. So it's grayed out because I haven't selected something, right? So what you typically do is you highlight it, you say insert, okay, and then I do table. Since I already have a table, it's not giving me that option, right? Otherwise, and then you have default formats. For those of you that want to know, can I make it different colors, blah, blah, yada, yada, yada. I can do a lot of different things with the table. The only advantage I see for it, some people like the aesthetics, is I can now sort it without losing anything. What if I just want to know my total returns from largest to smallest, right? It kept all the other things in order, so I can say, oh, wow, yeah, my best investment, okay, on a total return is 18%, right? But if I want to look at annualized returns, then I'll just sort in this column from largest to smallest, right? So it turns out in 256 days, I've got 12%, right? Whereas this one, was 1373, but with the added days, it was slightly less on an annualized basis. Or, hey, how much capital did I put in risk? I want to look at my smallest amount of investment to my biggest. So tables are really cool. All right, let's jump into where I think my subscribers are going to care about Misty or Coney. So what I did, there's a couple ways to do this. Um, I think this is fairly straightforward. So I come to Misty and I say, okay, well, I'm going to identify my shares. So on 226 this year, I bought 600 shares of Misty at 21.20. The fund was fairly new, I think 5 days old. So my investment was 12,720. So I went in and said, what's today's price? Well, today's Saturday, but on Friday it closed at 29.62. Okay, so the math says I'm going to multiply these, right? 600 by this price. So now I've got what is my current value. I've also got what did I pay to get into that. So here's my gain. Again, on days invested equals today minus A15, right? So it tells me I've had this investment for 54 days. So my return, even though it shrunk, I think I had almost 100% return. Well, I did when it was up around 42 and 43, right? So we've all lost some monies there, but I haven't tended to trade it. In Coney, I added some yesterday. I added another 100 shares to my 800, so I now have 900, and I added those at 22.71 or 22.91. It closed at 22.71. So anyway, 54 days in, and then here's the formula for total return. Again, not real complicated. You come out here and you say, what's the current value? Subtract your investment, and then divide by the investment, right? So F15 minus D15 divided by D15. So I've got a 39.72, almost 40% return. Well, but I've only had it for less than 2 months, right? And that's not counting dividends, because I've collected one dividend, right? So that's saying if you kept on growing, which who knows, right? You'd have a 859% return. Okay, so that's how annualized works. So in order to come in here, normally you do each piece and then add the two. So I just drug these across and said, okay, in my case, for those of you, nobody has gotten more dividends because the fund only started in February, right? They didn't pay in early March, and then they paid in early April. So, you know, come May 8th, I think it is, we'll have another May 9th, within a day or so there, we'll have another dividend, right? May only be $1 or $2, but we'll have another one. So I just simply added these two together, left all this the same, and said, okay, now my value has, now I multiplied 3374 by 600, because that's how much money, you know, I really have. I have this value, plus I still have the 412 they paid me. Some of you that drip don't need to do it that way. You just say your original investment is now 649 shares or whatever your share count from reinvesting through a drip, right? So you've got a one column method of doing it. I'm not dripping those, right? So, and I think it's a good idea to drip. I'm just retired, so I take the money and use it. I buy other things if I, you know, like in Coney, I bought more shares, so you could call that a mini drip. So when I carry that across, it's the same number of days, right? Because the math is all when I invested. And that's, so now my return is closer to 60% than 40% because of the dividends, right? So that's a crazy annualized return. But let's go down to Coney, because Coney's, you know, a little more realistic, and Coney's not completely accurate. So my investment price is a little higher than 23.15, but I had a bunch of days where I bought it in early January, and I didn't want to mess that all up. So actually, sorry, I took my actual average price on the spreadsheet that I keep in another spreadsheet to know what my average price on the 900 shares is. So I just summed it up as all January 5, even though it really wasn't January 5. But I collected the same amount of dividends. So here's my investment value, right? 900 times 23.15. Here's today's price. So what is the value? Well, the value now is 22.71. I paid an average price of 23.15, so I've lost almost $400, right? And I've been in it 106 days, right? Same day formula. So my return is almost a negative 2% in the 106 days. Annualized, I'd lose 6% money. Now, let's fast forward and look at the dividends. So those of you that are familiar with Coney goes way back. Some of you in Coney may have 7 payments, 9 payments, right? It's easy to find them at the EOMax website. So here's the 3 I collected, right? The February, March, and April. Okay, so that yielded me $5.53. So now I'm at 28,214. So when I do my value, look at my total return. 22% from losing 2%, right? So it says I'm making about 20% in 106 days, so that's annualized out at 98.28. Everybody's is going to vary depending on how many how many times they've collected and what is their yield. Because you all know, so far the low has been, I think, 107 or low ones, and the high was last month at 279, and there were a few other twos, right? So this will really help you. And some people have asked me, what's going on? Your options, you give me all that option math and I totally get lost. So I just thought I would put this out here so you guys can go back to it. I know some of you understand this, but you should always own something and never forget that you're doing this as a bullish bet, because Defiance, just FYI, so Defiance is another family of funds. I like EOMax better, but Defiance has some ETFs. Supposedly they're coming out next week with a minus 2x, MISTY equivalent. They can't call it MISTY, right? When you type in a minus or an equal in Excel, you guys probably know it's looking for a formula. But just say inverse 2x MISTY equivalent, okay? So what that means is, if you see, now that would have been a great one. I could have, reasonably predicted when we were at 42 that we likely would be going down, right? But I'm not a pure trader when it comes to some of these. I did buy more Coney. I'll buy when they're low, but I don't necessarily. I think for people that have the time and want to do all of that, hell, you could intraday trade, right? But it always seems like you get caught out. Let's say you've been intraday trading. I thought of doing that on BITO. And BITO is going between, which is a bullish bet. It's an ETF on Bitcoin, and it pays a dividend, not the kind of yield here. I did get $1 out of a 20-something stock, but it's been lower on the yield. But, you see a pattern where it's trading between, 31 and 29, 7 days in a row, and you say to yourself, man, I'm gonna buy it every time it's 29, and and I'm going to sell it every time it's 30. Well, you can do that, right? But one day it's going to run way below, okay, and that kills your getting out, and it's also sometimes going to skyrocket. So just understand, do what you want. I like a core position. Again, I'm still very bullish on these Bitcoin positions. Let's see what the halving effect has going forward. So sorry I rambled on all that for guys that only want the investment, but these should provide you good templates. I'm not sure if I can upload these from a Google Drive. I'll try and figure that out. But for now, hit me up in comments if you want the format or you want the underlying sheet, and then you can alter it. Okay, guys, that's all for today. Thanks. Again, this is not investment advice. I'm not an investment advisor. This is for fun and education. See ya.